Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why somebody would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call it your capital S story. In each episode of Storylines Live, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experiences and key learnings to help you and your organization do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable business results. In this episode, we're honored to have Laurie Barkman, the business transition Sherpa, boy, I love that, as our guest. Let me tell you a little bit about Laurie. Laurie's the former CEO of a $100 million company that was sold to a Fortune 50. Today, she's a business transition and M&A intermediary. She advises owners how to create more valuable businesses and find the right buyer when it's time to let go. Her expertise in business transition, succession, and entrepreneurship, marketing, and M&A has been spotlighted in various media, including Newsweek, Forbes, Yahoo Finance, and many more. She's also an adjunct professor of entrepreneurship at Carnegie Mellon University and the author of the Business Transition Handbook, How to Avoid Succession Pitfalls and Create Valuable Exit Options. And Laurie hosts the award-winning podcast, Succession Stories. Gee, I wonder why Laurie's on this podcast. It's rated in the top 2.5% of podcasts globally, which is a great achievement. Laurie graduated from Cornell and CMU Tepper School of Business. She holds a professional designation from the Alliance of Mergers and Acquisitions Advisors. Laurie, welcome to Storylines Live. Anything I missed in that?
Oh, goodness. Paul, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be with you this morning.
It's awesome to be with you for sure. I really appreciate that. Laurie, we always ask guests on the podcast about their capital S story. We want to know, kind of get a sense of those 4 questions that I talked about. What's most important to you and your business right now? Buy, work, invest, or partner?
What's important to me is what's important to my clients, which is their growth, transition, and succession.
Mm-hmm.
It is a journey. That's why I call it business transition. It's why I call myself the business transition Sherpa, because this is a movement from here to there. Some people are educated in the word exit planning. And I too have that designation. I'm a certified exit planning advisor. But the word exit is so finite. And so what I find with my clients and what I'm on with my own journey as an entrepreneur is recognizing that we all set goals. We all set goals. And
Hmm.
as a business owner, we're building our businesses. So many people I work with these are founder-led companies.
Yeah.
Many of them are bootstrapped. There's no outside funding. And they get to a point where they're thinking about their next chapter, whether it's 5 years away, 10 years away,
Mhm.
sometimes it's a year away. And they need somebody by their side. And so that's really the role that I'm playing and the opportunity that I have as an entrepreneur to build a practice that meets my clients where they are.
Laurie, I love that you chose such a powerful word to describe what you do, the word Sherpa. Could you give our audience a little bit of background? Why did you choose that word?
I think I was inspired by some hikes that we did many, many years ago. My husband and I were in Nepal and we had support. We knew that there was a park and a path, and we could have done it on our own, but we chose not to. And it was a 5, 6 day trek. And we had support. Somebody carrying my backpack it was essentially doing Stairmaster for 8 hours a day. I mean, we were just going up, 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 up in Nepal. And our goal was to see this amazing mountain range, which we did at 4 in the morning above the clouds. And to reach that peak and to reach that point where we said, gosh, we really couldn't have done this had we not had the support. So I respect the people who are doing the good work of the good work, right? To build the business. We're not going to build our business on our own. How do we ultimately create more value and let go when we're ready? And so this analogy of being on a journey as an entrepreneur. I've orbited entrepreneurs my whole career,
Mhm.
whether I've been in big co or small co, which is startups. I've been in both,
Right.
and global companies, local companies. And the commonality, I think, is whether or not you've started the business yourself, or for me, a lot of times I felt like an intrapreneur, if you know that phrase,
Oh, yeah.
where we are building, right? We're building as we go, but it can be a lonely place.
Yes.
We're always in our heads, and sometimes we're often in our own way, holding our companies back. And I just thought that this picture of a Sherpa, somebody who is really has the tools, has the toolkit,
Mm.
knows the path, has seen this puzzle play out, but every journey is different. And we have to be nimble and agile and be able to walk with our clients on their journey.
Wow, so beautifully said, Laurie. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I'm curious, and I'm sure that many of our listeners will be curious. So, Nepal, when I think of that country, I think of altitude. So, how high did you and your husband go on this several day hike?
Well, that is a great question. I think we made it to probably about 14,000 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, and the mountains we were looking at are so much higher. One of the mountains is the sixth highest
Mhm.
mountain in the world. And so our vantage point was to merely see those peaks, not climb them,
Right,
but to
right.
see them, even just to get to base camp of that trek in and of itself is a major trek. So that was not the journey was, to get on that carved out path and have a technical climb. It was actually a great hike because, and if I can call it a hike, it was really a uphill walk for
Yeah,
5, 6 days.
yes.
Um, but yeah, it was the Dhaulagiri mountain range, the Annapurna mountain range, and Dhaulagiri is the sixth highest mountain, and so that part of the range, and I don't know, you probably can't see it, but I actually have a poster of it right behind me here, was really the pinnacle of the trek.
Amazing. Now, that peak is what? Probably about 20,000?
Probably,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, amazing, just amazing. Okay, of all the places you could have done this, why Nepal? Why did you and your husband choose to do this?
Wow, this is a story in and of itself. We were in this magical point in our life when we didn't have any kids yet, and we had the perfect time to take a 7 week journey around the world, and we did. He had just finished business school, and I was about to go into business school, and we found ourselves with. Again, he knew he was going to be gainfully employed. I knew I was going into business school, but we had this time that we could take off.
Right.
And we did. We kind of went around we joke, we went around the world to the left.
Mhm.
So we went to his sister's wedding in Colorado. And then from there, flew to Bali, and from there, Malaysia, Thailand, then Nepal, and we ended our journey in Scandinavia. My husband is Swedish, and I spent time in Denmark when I was in college. So it was a really amazing, amazing trip. All we had was a backpack.
I love that. And I have to say, in our work, Laurie, and I'm sure this is true in yours, and we'll really dig into this in the rest of the episode. Our personal stories truly do inform our entrepreneurial journey. And so, as you can see, folks, from the word Sherpa, we've unpacked literally quite a story here with Laurie. Speaking of stories, Laurie, you host a podcast that has the word stories in the title. Would you please share with our audience your take on storytelling? Obviously, they got my take at the beginning of the episode.
My show is called Succession Stories, and it's largely for founders and next generation leaders to learn about the innovation, growth, and transition stories that have built so many wonderful companies and also seen the demise of others. And we learn from what works well. We also learn from what doesn't work well. I've had people come on my show who tell me amazing personal stories about resilience and
Mm.
things in their personal life. I had one guest tell me within the first 5 minutes how um, he was homeless at 9 because it was the second time his parents trying to light him on fire.
Oh.
So it was, and I had done a pre-call with this gentleman, by the way, which that did not come up. I had to really maintain my composure on that one. And we spent time on it, and we honored that time and understood his background, and then to the amazing entrepreneur that he's become. So I think a lot of human stories came out, especially during COVID. This show launched literally at the start of COVID,
Wow.
and
Right.
nobody knew how important the medium of meeting online and doing these, having these wonderful conversations. I've always admired the PBS. I think it's led by PBS, the StoryCorps.
Yes.
And there's part of different
Right.
museums now where they preserve these conversations. And I always felt like the authenticity of the speakers, it's usually two people talking to each other. And so that's what my show is. It's largely an interview show, and everybody's going to learn something, right? And so whether or not we're learning because it was a great outcome and gee, that worked well for them, let me think about that, let me take some action, or it's inspiring a next generation leader to take that baton and do something different. That's what's really motivating the stories that I'm trying to tell on my show. And so that's what storytelling means to me.
That's awesome. Now I have to ask this question because you are technically in the M&A business, and I agree, exit is a four-letter word that I don't like. Succession is a longer word, but it more accurately describes things. I thought this, or the conventional wisdom, Laurie, is that this is all about numbers. Why do stories matter in your work with your clients?
Well, I like to say, Paul, that it's about the head, heart, and the wallet. I
Mm,
just spent 4 days last week with CEOs doing workshops for Vistage. You and I are members of
yes,
Vistage.
we are.
And I spent 4 days in South Carolina and Georgia.
Nice.
And my very early introduction, when I do these workshops, is I say I work with the head, heart, and the wallet. And
Mhm.
today's session, of course, is about the wallet, but it's also about the how do we think about things? How does our body follow our mind? If we're not really interested in working on transition, guess what? We're not going to work on it. Our body follows where our mind wants us to go. And if our heart is not in it either, maybe we've experienced some tragedy in the business. Maybe someone has passed away. Maybe we've inherited this company. We don't know anything about it. That happens to a lot of spouses, by the way, where they're in crisis, they're in mourning, and now they got to run a company they know nothing about. Talk about a challenge. So I like to talk about this as a triumvirate, right? It's the three things. And too many times owners just kick the can on the more personal transition topics. They'll say, oh, well, I'm not going to retire for another 10 years. I had a younger gentleman in this particular session. And he said, oh, I said, well, how old are you? And he says, I'm in my mid 30s. Okay. I said, are you married? Yes. Do you have children? Yes. Are your parents still alive? Unfortunately, they were not. Do you have any siblings? Yes. I said, okay, well, we're starting to paint a picture of you outside the business. Are you going to wait 10, 20 years to live that full life and have a runway and an off ramp to what your life is like independent of your business? No, I'm not. Okay, good answer. And that's exactly the point. We can't wait for those things. Otherwise, guess what's going to happen, Paul? Regret.
Regret, exactly. The outcome's not going to be there. And I had a similar experience. I was speaking for Vistage last week in Philadelphia, of course, for 3 days on the topic of stories. And I love the way you describe that, Laurie. Head, heart, and wallet. And you put the wallet last, right? And a lot of times, especially with founder-led companies, there is, and we're going to dig into this in the second half of this episode very deeply. There is this sense driven by the head and especially by the heart that founders have that their business is worth quite a bit. And then they see the numbers that come from the potential strategic partner or whoever the acquirer might be. And it provokes a very heartfelt response, let's say, right? So my point is you really can't separate these things, right?
It's hard to separate them. I guess we can try. What happens when we have a positive attitude towards change and a positive attitude towards business transition? Like I said, we'll work on that. We'll make proactive time. We'll recognize that exit planning and succession planning is good business planning. And why would we wait for those things? Why wouldn't we want to have a more valuable business that could sell at any time? We never know when a buyer is going to appear. And I call that the bluebird. We never know when the bluebird's going to appear, and why not be ready? Again, it's going to make your business more valuable and enjoyable to run now, as well as transferable in the future, and attractive. Those are all the fundamentals for why a company would sell versus not selling. Those are all good things. They're really good things. And you don't need to, kind of wait for the Laurie Barkman workshop to be able to benefit from those. Of course, I would love for people to come to my workshop. And I think also when there's the D's are the things we don't want to talk about. The D's are like the taboo topics, death, divorce, dissolution of partnerships. It could be disasters like weather disasters. It could be complete disruption like when we felt from COVID. And for some businesses now, they're starting to stare at some of the maybe changes in the regulatory environment, the tariff environment. And so some of those things we just don't control. But if we're building an asset that's worth protecting, which I'm sure we are, then, why aren't we protecting it? And if we do encounter some of these D's that can have a negative impact on our business, there are ways to protect the value of the asset and kind of be ready with contingency planning. So sometimes we have to, proverbial break the glass in a case of emergency, and you need to have an emergency succession. That can happen, or an interim succession that can happen. And that's okay. And organizations have a life cycle. And this happens because we're human. 100% of us, Paul, are going to leave our company one day. But
right.
The challenge is that very few are prepared.
That's right. Every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And this is part of what we're talking about in terms of especially founder-led companies. Folks, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to dig deeply into how Laurie works with her clients.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back, folks, to this episode of Storylines Live with our guest, Laurie Barkman, the business transition Sherpa. Laurie, before we took the break, you were describing sort of the ideal scenario. You mentioned the bluebird. Was that the bluebird of happiness? I just have to ask.
It was the Bluebird of experience. This was a backstory in the introduction that the company that I was with was a third generation, 125-year-old business, and it
Wow.
was approached from a global company
Hmm.
as a surprise. And the global company had said, "We've been watching you from a distance for about 6, 7 years."
Wow. That's amazing. Folks, that could happen to you too, right? So we all got to be thinking about this. Now, Laurie, let's like open the hood here. Give us a sense of how you work with your clients. Describe an ideal engagement, however you'd like to dig into it.
One of the first things that we do is we do start with some diagnostics, just like any good Sherpa. We have to have the map, and the map starts with figuring out, well, where are we right now? And in the book that you mentioned in my introduction, it's called the Business Transition Handbook. There's a reason why the early chapters are focused on the heart.
Yes.
I do want people to understand how their identity should be and is separate from the business. Too many times we talk about our company as our baby, and we're so tied in with that that when we eventually separate, it feels really like a loss and versus a celebration. So that's a good place to start. Is I have a series of assessments, one of which is around personal identity, personal readiness. The other, Paul, is on business attractiveness, business readiness, and a number of other things. We spend time on what I'll call the freedom finding. I have a master class that I've created, and I use it with my group advisory when I have a group of folks where we're focused in and we're dialed in on these topics, and they get the peer support of the group, but they get myself and others as a facilitator who have experience in business transition and M&A work. And I think it's a wonderful way to um, workshop, right? And roll up our sleeves, not only on the identification of, gee, what should we be working on, but then the how. The how is really the hard part. I like to call this a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the group sessions, one of the things that they really appreciate is the structure, because they don't have to reinvent the wheel, just like you go on this trek, right? We've got the tools.
Yes.
How we apply the tools for your individual company is really the opportunity. But we've got the tools, we've got the been there, done that experience. And I think that's one of the things from a differentiation, because I am a mergers and acquisitions advisor. I'm not only going to talk about the one transaction that I went through 10 years ago, which is the Bluebird one. I'm going to talk about, and not obviously disclose anything that I shouldn't, but in all the experience that I've gathered all over the years, it benefits clients because it's just not a one-trick pony. There's a
Right.
methodology, proven methodology, a proven structure, and then the communications and support of this community. So it's really a very powerful
Mhm.
way that we work with clients.
Wow, that's great. Now, so your Bluebird exit was about 10 years ago, roughly. When did you start the business transition Sherpa?
About 5 years ago.
Okay, and why? What was it that 5 years after that exit, you said to yourself, this is the work I need to do?
Well, there's actually a predecessor to that,
Okay,
if I may. Yeah.
sure.
My first business was started in 2012. And that business was it was called Small Dot Big.
Uh-huh.
And so the play on words, I'll share with you. And then there was a transition to business transition Sherpa.
Mhm.
When I was working in marketing, I was running very large marketing departments, very large marketing budgets. I spent a
Sure.
lot of my career in marketing, and but I found myself on the other side of a downsizing.
Mhm.
And so I thought, well, this is interesting. Why don't I put out my own shingle? Thought of the name, and I'll tell you the inspiration for it in a moment. Put out a website because I had all these friends and agencies. They're like, oh, we'll make you a website. Okay, thank you. This is amazing. I had two instant clients because they were good friends and they were excited
Right.
to work with somebody like me over, and it was the summertime. And so I experienced that initial bump of, oh, wow, this is great. I can do project work. I
Hmm.
have the flexibility and was enjoying it. Then, however, I experienced the feast or famine of the business development cycle, and
Yes.
I decided to ice it. And so I iced the business for about 10 years. I just wasn't ready to work in it, but I kept the LLC alive. So the backstory on the name, and if you kind of play it out fully, it's small.big.com. And so the small dot big dot was essentially me playing pool with somebody from Australia.
Uh-huh.
And instead of them saying solids or stripes, they said small dot or big dot.
Ah,
And it blew my mind. And I couldn't unsee it, right? Because once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. So picture a stripe, that's a big dot. Okay.
yes.
And a
Wow.
solid would be a small dot because the number was in the small dot.
Ah,
And that became thematically what I wanted as my relationships with my clients, that I wanted to
wow.
help them see things differently. And
Yeah.
so the small.big.com was a little bit of a play on that. And so I had small.big for years, and the logo with up to the right was about growth,
Mm,
right? How do we go from small to big? And
yes.
again, my experience in working from startups to big co. And so this notion of we're going to go from small to big, let me help you grow. And one of the big ways that I was doing that was strategic planning. It's just one of my superpowers for whatever reason. Over the years, I've honed the skill, got the tools, and I was using it with clients and executive coaching with CEOs. So enter in the 5 years ago timeframe when essentially I was getting more educated about some of the experience I had. I was like, oh, well, I went through this acquisition and there's an acquisitions advisory practice and there are firms who focus on M&A.
Mm,
And I can take my skills as a CEO, as a C-suite executive, stay working at the the C level, the founder level, the board level, and stitch it together with transition planning, which was again from my experience with the show, all the stories that I had been gathering about innovation, growth, and transition. And ultimately, that's when I said to myself, you know what? The name of this business isn't serving me the way I need it to. I
right.
honor it. I'm going to say goodbye to it. It still exists, but it's kind of over to the side. And
Right.
I don't use that branding anymore. The Business Transition Sherpa got a trademark on it, and Business Transition Sherpa LLC, or in short, btsherpa.com. It's just something more I can do with. And as soon as I started using it in the market,
Yep.
and I appreciate you, making the comments that you did, Paul. You were like, oh, I get it. Right. I get it. And it
Absolutely.
just became an easier way to talk about the Sherpa methodology, the Sherpa way, the Sherpa framework. I'm with you on your journey. Transition is a journey. And people are like, oh, I get it. It makes a lot of sense. And I haven't forgotten my superpower. And what I did, Paul, was I wrote the book. The Business Transition Handbook ultimately leads up to how
Yeah.
do we do strategic transition planning? And so I redefined how I'm using that very interesting and valuable tool called strategic planning, but I apply it with the knowledge and all the fundamentals that helps a business create more attractive businesses, transferable businesses,
Yes.
and ready to sell businesses. And so that's the swim lane that I now occupy.
I love that. Obviously, folks, you can tell Laurie is a storyteller. If I were listening to this episode, I'd be scrolling back and forth to listen to that story or watch it on YouTube, depending on how you consume this episode, because there's a lot of knowledge there. Um, so, Laurie, it leads me to ask this question. Obviously, you're passionate about what you do. Um, what gives you the most satisfaction in your work?
I love working with business owners when I know they have that aha moment. I have a client in California. I've been working with him for almost a year, and we're in a bluebird situation where we're evaluating whether or not
Wonderful.
he should sell to this particular
Mhm.
buyer that's appeared out of nowhere. And he said, I would never have been ready to entertain this discussion with them had I not been working with you, Lori. And that's just really meaningful to me, and that and the trust and the clarity of a lot of these issues, it's just so apparent when a client like him is parroting back things that I've said or talked about. I
Right.
know that it's very, very meaningful. These are clarity on big things, right? A lot of times business owners are alone in their head.
Oh,
Maybe they're in Vistage, but we all know we don't
mhm.
always share everything, right? We do keep it to
Right.
ourselves. And so this is a safe space, a private space, whether I'm meeting with clients one-on-one or we're meeting in groups. It's a safe space. And I think that's probably the most satisfying thing. I've worked with clients at various stages of where they are. I have another client that's all in on growth. He's already doubled his business in revenue since I started working with him, and he's
Wow.
setting his sights on 10x. I mean, it's really, really exciting. And a client like him
Mhm.
is such a sponge because he knows he doesn't know everything. He's very coachable. He wants to grow. He wants the guidance and support. And I just love that too. I think being coachable uh, as an owner, is super important. We learn from everybody around us.
Wait,
And,
isn't
you
that
know,
the truth? Yeah.
yeah,
A wise friend of mine once said, Paul, you can still be breathing and be dead. If you're not learning, you're dead from the neck up. And I think that's kind of what you're describing there, right?
I think so. Well,
Yeah.
I say it in businesses too. You could apply it to you yourself. You can say it to about your company.
Oh,
I
yeah.
say if our companies are not growing, they're dying. Because complacency is not a strategy.
Yeah.
And so why be complacent with yourself too?
Right. I mean, there's so much happening these days. Um, and we don't want to dig into this topic in this episode, but I just throw out the AI, it's changing so many businesses. And if you're not considering huge seismic shifts like that in your business, you're probably not going to be well prepared for a successful exit, right?
I was just using AI this morning. I was using it live in my workshop last week. Part of my workshop is a roll up the sleeves section, and I encourage people to take some big leaps of thought. And I say, is there anybody in the room that doesn't think that they can answer this question for their industry? And I get some stares. And then I said, well, let me pick a couple of examples. And I went to ChatGPT live and I put in the
No.
question and I put in their industry. And
Yep.
then we read out, what it came. Now, not everything's going to be a perfect fit like a shoe,
Right.
but that's okay. At least gets our minds turning.
Doesn't.
I think these are such amazing tools. It's an amazing time. And to learn how agentic AI is working, to learn what these free tools can do for you. If you're sitting on an airplane and you have a few minutes and you can go to ChatGPT and ask it a question, oh my goodness, right? We're even for travel planning. My husband and I are going to Norway this summer, and I just put in last night, okay, give me 5 days in Norway, and it's just incredible.
Yeah,
It's just
it really
incredible.
is. It really is. And, like I said, not to get onto a tangent, but for those listening or watching, this is the sort of transformative thought that we need to engage in when we pull our heads up from the day to day and say, I think it's time to consider my transition and what my next steps might be. And if you're doing that, you probably should talk to Laurie. So, Laurie, how can people find you?
The best way is btsherpa.com is my website. And if people want to email me,
Mhm.
they're more than welcome to do that. Laurie is Laurie. So Laurie at btsherpa.com. We are offering webinars on a monthly cycle, and we're also offering a cohort-based group that I mentioned earlier. It's
Yes.
called the Freedom Finder Intensive. And the Freedom Finder Intensive is on an ongoing basis starting about every 8 weeks. So that's an amazing resource. On my website, they can grab some assessments if they want to, or they can meet with me and I'll go through the detail with them. But we're really here to support people on their journey. The other thing, Paul, as a gift for your audience, if they want to grab a digital copy of my book, it's btsherpa.com/book, and they can download a digital copy of my book. And if they want to buy one, of course, we'd love for them to get one on Amazon. And if they read it and enjoy it, to please leave a review. We really appreciate all the amazing feedback we've gotten on the book.
Yeah, as a fellow author, I totally agree with you. If you're watching this, you see my book behind me. Laurie, it has just been such a great pleasure to have you on Storylines Live. And folks, we will include links to all of the resources that Laurie mentioned in the show notes. Laurie, thank you again for being here. Really appreciate it. So much that I personally learned, and I hope our audience did as well. I want to thank the audience for being here as well, and we will see you next time on the next episode of Storylines Live.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkins-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkinsporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.